Hey, it's Coach T. This is the 7th video in my year-long process to learn C#. If you've been following along with the other logs, you more or less know my story, but I'm a teacher. I'm an instructional coach as well in Central New York. That's the name, Coach T CNY, right? And my idea here is I'm going to chart my progress in learning C# and be honest about what I'm working on, be honest about what I'm struggling with, chart some of my celebrations so that in a year, next July, when I come back in July 2025, I can actually see my progress and have kind of a record of where I've been going. I have notebooks and stuff too, but I don't date the stuff that I put into my notebooks, so it can be kind of hard to know when did I get that skill down or when did I pick up that particular piece of learning. So this week I didn't have a lot of projects that I built. I'm still a little bit straddling between HTML and CSS, which I've been doing in the mornings because I'm really leaning towards trying to learn Blazor, which means I need to have some HTML and CSS knowledge. And then in the afternoons, really focusing on C# when I've got time when the girls are down for a nap or in the evening. And so it was a little bit scatterbrained this week. But the good news is I've basically picked up HTML. It's way easier than anything that I've been doing in C# or Python. And CSS is intriguing, a little bit frustrating just because I don't know all the bells and whistles. But at this point, by the end of the week, I was able to make a multi-page site. I can host the site. I can use HTML to style a site. I can link and do all the stuff that makes a web page act like a web page, with the exception of like animations and stuff like that. And at this point, I'm not getting into it. I'm proceeding with the HTML and CSS basically just to make sure that I have a firm foundation for when I hit whatever the first web app is that I want to build. And I know that's a long entrance ramp to get to that point. I don't know how to do server-side backend stuff yet. I don't know how to. I can build a form in HTML. I can't connect it, but the whole idea is to learn enough HTML and CSS to take the C# that I've been working on and then be able to link them with Blazor using C# as the backend language. I guess also the front-end language. I really like that idea. So at this point, I haven't really touched Python aside from some of the coaching stuff that I've done with people this week. I did a little bit of that, but not very much. I work with a couple other beginners and they got started. They asked some questions. I helped them through some projects, brief little things. I don't charge for the coaching at all. I'm not interested in money that way. I just want to help people, basically. That's the whole reason I went into teaching. So in this case, I'm helping other beginners get over the rocks. So if you do have a Python question, you're a beginner, or a C# question, you're a beginner, feel free to reach out to me via the comments or well, I guess the comments is probably the only way you have to get a hold of me because I don't have my own website up and running, but that will happen once I understand how to use Blazor in a couple months probably. But I'd be happy to help and provide, some on-demand coaching for free. That's what I'm doing this for. I don't have a villain arc in which I break bad and start charging money to help you learn. You shouldn't have to spend money to learn to code. I have spent maybe $100 total over the last year, and that includes 4 books, a Humble Bundle, and 2 or 3 Udemy courses that I bought on sale. That's it. So anyway, that has nothing to do with this week. This week was for C#. Focusing in again. It's very early. I'm only on my first cup of coffee. It is what it is. This week, I really focused on learning what properties are in C#. And I'll be honest, I did not like them at first. I was like, why can't I do this with methods? I understand what fields and variables are. I don't see why I should have to get and set and that whole syntax. It took me a couple of days of playing with it. And I don't have properties in my football game that I showed off last week because I didn't know what they were. So what ended up happening is I flubbed on Christina's masterclass course exercises. I had to look at her solution and read it, and I was like, I don't get it. I get why it works. I don't get why it's necessary. I can read the code and make sense of it. That's fine. I just didn't understand why it was necessary or why we were being pushed that way. So then I went to R.B. Whitaker's C# Player's Handbook. He had, incidentally, a chapter on properties was literally the next thing I had to read. And I was like, okay, all right, let's go through it. I took my notes. I read it carefully. I did his exercise, which was a revision of a previous exercise that we had done called Vin's arrows. This time we had to change Vin's arrows to have properties instead of publicly editable fields. And I was like, I hate this. Why? So I went back to Christina's videos and I watched them. And this time I could feel it was a little bit different. I was like, okay, so I don't have to have a get method and a set method that I wrote myself. I can just use the property field get set to do that. And I can see in the older syntax she shows off, oh, I can validate setting to make sure, So I'm thinking about how do I apply this to my own projects? Well, maybe I want to have a set property that forces you to have an at something.com in there. Oh, okay, I can do that without having to have a method that does it. And it's a little bit easier to read. So I went back through, she's got like 3 videos back to back to back on property, a need for properties, and then computed properties. And she talks about processing power and how all of that ties together. And then I went back to R.B. Whitaker's text and I was like, okay, we need to read it with not fresh eyes. We need to read it with seasoned eyes at this point. So I reread R.B. Whitaker's chapter on them. He's only got the one, but it's like 8 pages long. And I was like, I'm starting to understand it. The exercise was easier. And I sat for a while and I ultimately made a decision that I often make when I don't get a concept. I went to Copilot or Gemini. I don't remember which one I used. And I just said, can you explain this to me? Start simply, assume I'm a student, and just give me a definition and a use case. Why would I use properties versus, appropriately laid out private fields with methods that can access and then also methods that can set that value? And I got an answer that I didn't like because basically it said you're being lazy. But it did specifically mention that in order for me to be able to build UI applications with something like Windows Presentation Foundation, or I think it mentioned Blazor, I have to be able to use properties for data binding. And that was kind of like the full brakes on, okay, all right, so I can't just do it the way I want to do it. I got to do it the way that the experts want to do it. So, and not that Christina and R.B. Whitaker aren't experts, but they didn't mention the data binding. And I know a little bit about data binding from having worked with tkinter in Python. So I was like, this is important. You cannot be lazy anymore. You're going to have to actually sit there and figure this out. So on day 3, when I had my time again, I went back through R.B. Whitaker's chapter first. And this time I really, really read it closely. And I was thinking, okay, how would I integrate this into football? Because that's, at this point, football is my biggest project to date. And I was like, how would I integrate properties? Well, I have a whole bunch of properties. I've got a team name that could become a property. I have stats for quarterbacks, for example, that could be a property. I've got the total number of catches. If I wanted to have that data saved somewhere, I could have that as a property. And then in the game rules class, I also have a bunch of properties like the current yard, right? Well, I don't want that to be publicly settable. That needs to be privately settable within the game class. And it started to come together, and I was like, okay, if I were to do a version 4 of football, which I will not do at this time because I don't have enough time left, I was like, I can see where there are variables now, or fields rather, and there are methods that are redundant if I were to just use a property. So ultimately, I ended up going through R.B. Whitaker's chapter on properties 3 times. And then I went back through Christina's videos 3 times. And I started asking her questions via the Udemy's Q&A tab. And she was like Johnny on the spot responding to me, which I really appreciated. I think I got the first response within like 15 minutes, and she answered 2 or 3 of my questions within an hour. Which I really appreciate. She clarified some things. In a couple cases, they had almost identical language, and I was like, not a 100% crystal clear on what they meant, and she clarified it for me. So I learned a whole bunch in 3 days, and I also practiced what I preach about slowing down and not trying to just rush over the rocks to get to the next thing, because, and I would not have known this had I not asked the AI, because none of the other learning resources that I use mentioned it. But that would have caused a downstream problem where I would have been fighting against properties once I hit WPF or Blazor or whatever, where I needed to do data binding. So I'm really grateful that I did ask the question, because generally I'm a little AI phobic. I played with it a lot with the game business stuff, with image generation. I played with it with a little bit of idea generation, and ultimately I kind of just decided it makes me feel icky. So I haven't been using it very much unless I'm completely stuck and I'm like, all right, what is wrong? And oftentimes it's some little syntax thing, you know, but I try really hard not to use it. But in this case, I was like, I really need a definition here. I just am not, this is just a little bit over my head. 3 times later, 3 days later, it's not over my head. I get it. I'm with my little projects that I'm working on, I'm beginning to integrate properties into how I'm writing. I'm thinking about, do I want that to be publicly gettable and publicly settable? Do I want it to be gettable only, read only? Do I want it to be gettable but privately settable in the case of like current yards, for example? And the syntax is easier now that I kind of get it. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but that's what this is all about. That's what learning is all about, is becoming uncomfortable so that you can grow, because you don't grow when you're comfortable, except horizontally, you know. So make yourself uncomfortable, actually dig into the things that you don't understand, and be willing to admit you're wrong and you're being lazy, and you'd be surprised how quickly you can like really pick up a complicated concept. I haven't mastered properties by any step, you know, and I know on the other end of this, I have static stuff that I need to get into. And when I dabbled with game design stuff last year with a couple of Unity courses that I didn't finish because I was way in over my head, I remember seeing a lot of public static voids and not understanding what static was. Now, I kind of think I know what it means. With the context of the stuff from last year and where I've been going, I have a feeling that when you hit a static void, it can't change. That's what static means. So I'm wondering if it's going to be like calling like a read line or something, where you're calling into the method itself, not an, or the class itself, and not an instance. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because you don't have to rename the printer every time. So my prediction is, when I start looking at static classes, at least, I don't know about static methods, if that's a thing, but when I'm looking at static classes, my prediction is it's going to be something where you don't instance the class, but you call directly to the class. Because if you were to instance something that can't change, they would all be identical, right? So I don't know why you'd have multiple objects of all the same type. That doesn't seem logical to me. So I'm guessing that's what it is. I'll know next week, because R.B. Whitaker's next chapter is static stuff, and then Christina's next chapter is all static stuff. So anyway, that's where I'm at with C#. The only real thing that I accomplished this week, other than, you know, the studying itself, which is a gain and a achievement in and of itself, is I did finish her object-oriented programming. I think it's called the introductory module, but her final project was another hot, cold, high, low dice rolling game. This is like the 5th or 6th time that I've programmed this damn thing. I did it in Python. I've guided people through it in Python. I have a video to how to do it in Python, and it's flawed, but you know what? It works. And I did it in procedural programming in C#, and now I've done it in object-oriented programming in C# as well. It's nowhere near as flashy as football, and I was a little bit let down because we've done all this work into establishing classes, writing methods, writing void methods, properties, fields, public, private, and I was like, this is it. It doesn't even mention classes in the video, or not the video, the resource guide. And I didn't want to use her videos. I didn't want to do a code along with her, because I want to be working on my own. Give me a project like you're my employer or my client, and go and tell me to go do it. That's what I want to do, because I won't know if I'm successful unless I can get it to work to your specifications without your help. So I haven't watched her videos on how she coded it. My solution, because I knew it was object-oriented programming, was to have a class game, which had all of the variables. When I say all of them, there were like 2, right? The target number, which was a random next function, or a random next variable, and then the number of guesses. And then there was one method in there that was a void method, and it was just a like tick the game forward. So it called from the player class, the other class, which had the current guess, and then it checked the player's current guess against the privately stored, actually as a property, the way that I wrote it, property of target number. And if they were equal, it ended the game and said you were 1. If not, it ticked over the game and it gave you one more chance, and it reported the number of chances you had left. That was my solution. It took me like maybe half an hour to write and maybe 10 minutes to plan it out. But I was just kind of a letdown because I was like, oh, this is way less challenging than her last capstone. Maybe that's a good thing. But as a teacher, as a coach, I kind of think it was an inappropriate capstone exercise for that particular module. So I don't know. I'm into static void stuff next, polymorphism and inheritance next, and then object oriented design, which I'm really looking forward to because it sounds interesting. But I go back to work as a teacher and coach on Monday. So that means that my 2 to 4 hours of practice a day is about to be scrunched down to an hour in the evenings. And if I'm really ambitious, maybe a half an hour in the morning, which I'm not looking forward to, but that's the way it's going to be because when I'm at work, I work. So, yeah, I'm kind of bummed that I'm about to lose all my time. I've got, well, I said I go back to work on Monday. I go back to work full time in a week. So I have 4 business days left to do work. So I'm not, there's no way in hell that I'm going to finish her, the next module with Christina, but I'm going to still put in my hour, 2 hours, 3 hours if I can get it daily. And spend obviously as much time as I can with the girls before I got to go back. But, yeah, it's kind of a bummer to lose your time, but you can't be a professional learner all the time. At some point you got to go back to doing. So, that's it. This code in the background is an older Dibbles program that I have been writing, as an experiment this is all procedural. Look at this thing. It's awful. I don't even think I have do I have classes? No, I don't think I have classes. Nope. This is this is one of the last procedural programs that I wrote. Ooh, looking at it's making me a little bit sick. So I got to come back to this and redo this in object-oriented design. That might be a fun project for a couple weeks from now when I have less time to practice. I don't know. We'll see. I'm nowhere near Blazor at this point. I know that. I need another couple months. So 8 to 10 weeks more of introductory object-oriented design, working with Whitaker, working with Christina, working on Learn.Microsoft. And we'll get there, though, because we have 52 weeks to do it, and we've only have seven so far in the tank in terms of devlog. So future me, when we go back and watch this in July 2025, how you feeling now? So that's it. If you like these kinds of devlog videos, I do one a week. It's going to transition to Saturday in a couple of weeks, and it'll stay Saturday from there on. I'm still doing the weekly-ish Python introductory videos. They are not designed for intermediate learners. They're not designed for advanced learners. They're designed for people like me a year ago who were struggling over the raw rocks. So you might see that as an intermediate learner, you might be like, I would do that differently. Fine, do it differently. It's really designed to help people get up and running and start to build confidence. They're not perfect because I'm a learner and I'm not a professional. But I am trying really hard to become a good coach to help people build cool stuff. And that's what I want to do. In a couple weeks, also, the Affinity Publisher 2 videos will start to drop. I think it's 1 or 2 a week. It's a 25 video series that we're going to go through January, maybe February. And it will teach you everything you need to know to build really cool layouts. That's it. It's a 20-minute long devlog. Week 7, I'll be back in a week, and we'll be standing on the precipice of having almost no time left. So, hooray! Have a good last week of summer if you're like me. See you later.